representations of his wonderful prowess. Report. The aesthetic sense of the Lord is manifested in the artistic, colorful creation of varieties of birds like the peacock, parrot, and cuckoo. The celestial species of human beings, like the Gandharvas and the Vidyadharas, can sing wonderfully and can entice even the minds of the heavenly demigods. Their musical rhythm represents the musical sense of the Lord. How then can he be impersonal? His musical taste, artistic sense, and standard intelligence, which is never fallible, are different signs of his supreme personality. The Manu Samhita is the standard law book for humanity, and every human being is advised to follow this great book of social knowledge. Human society is the residential quarters for the Lord. This means that the human being is meant for God realization and association with God. This life is a chance for the conditioned soul to regain his eternal God consciousness and thus fulfill the mission of human life. Maharaj Prahlad is the right type of representative of the Lord in the family of Asuras. None of the living beings is away from the Lord's gigantic body. Each and every one has a particular duty in relation to the supreme body. Disruption in the matter of discharging the specific duty assigned to each and every living being is the cause of disharmony between one living being and another. But when the relation is established in relation with the Supreme Lord, there is complete unity between all living beings, even up to the limit of the wild animals and human society. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu displayed this living unity in the jungle of Madhya Pradesh, where even the tigers, elephants, and many other ferocious animals perfectly cooperated in glorifying the Supreme Lord. That is the way to peace and amity all over the world. Om Agana Timanandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshor Ulamitam Yena Tashmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishnam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Garamayam Dadati Swapanantikam Pande Ham Shri Guru Shri Yukta Parakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnamam Shah Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raganaptam Itam Tam Shajivam Savadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Badan Saganalitam Shri Vishakam Itam Shah Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimante Bhakti Vikas Swaminiti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimante Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunivadi Pachkyataras Tardine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So, varieties of birds are indications of his masterful artistic sense. Manu, the father of mankind, is the emblem of his standard intelligence, and humanity is his residence. The celestial species of human beings like the Gandharvas, Vidyadharas, Charnas, and angels all represent his musical rhythm, and the demoniac soldiers are representations of his prowess. So we're almost at the end of the Virat Rupa explanation. So initially, I think in text 22 or something like that, so Maharaj Parikshit was asking, okay, like how do you, what's the process of meditation and how do you focus on the Lord? And so Sukadeva Goswami explains that this Virat Rupa conception, that, and Prabhupada explains it in the purport that, and I'll just read that real quick, that, let me see here exactly. So the idea is that the yogi, that there's different, he has different contaminations in his mind, you know, whatever it may be. His mind is just, it's not, and we can experience that. Our mind is sometimes restless, you know, we think of this, think of that, and we feel anxiety and feel disturbed. So nowadays, when people's minds are very disturbed, they go to see the psychologist or something, and they say, well, maybe you take this medication and take that medication. But previously, it was understood that, if you had a restless mind, that could be curbed by the process of yoga and meditation and things like that. So the specific thing is that, okay, the mind may be materially absorbed, but it's not enough just to void the mind. The mind has to be purified. So Sukadeva Goswami is explaining this for those yogis that they're not able to, for one reason or another, not able to come to the highest level of transcendence of Krishna consciousness. They have different attachments and their minds are impure. So they can begin to purify the mind by perceiving Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the material nature and understanding in that way. And after some time of focusing on this, if they do the process properly, then they'll be able to come to the position of their minds will be pure, and they'll be able to hear the actual message of Srimad Bhagavatam and understand that the Supreme is actually a person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in these previous verses here that we read, there are so many of them here. So today we were explaining that the Vyat Rupa, that they see the clouds in the sky. So you can see that that's like the hairs, and the day and night is like the dress, because we change our clothes, every day generally. So like that, the day and night come, and then the clothes are being changed. And the cause, the Mahatattva's intelligence, his mind changes like the moon. We see the moon. The moon isn't the same always. The moon is sometimes waning, sometimes waxing as the days go. So like that. And the mind also. Anyways, much can be said about the mind and the moon. So, and then continuing, and then saying these horses, mules, camels are his nails. So that much of this is given. And this particular verse is nice, because most of it has to do with the personality. We can look at something and then we could say, oh, it's like, the hairs and the body. But then when we look at a body, then we understand that there's some personality there also. Generally, people may be attracted to how someone looks, but then they want to know, what is that person actually like? And there's different sayings like that in the, Western world and things. But so these verses in particular, so it mentions here in the beginning about the artistic sense of the Lord. So the example here is given of different birds. So and we could see that actually, I was thinking about it a little bit. And there's so many different birds. And then I think here there's mentioned a couple, peacocks, parrots, and cuckoos. So there's many different types of parrots actually. There's and they're pretty cool looking actually. They're like, I remember seeing so many growing up, but they're like red and like rainbow and bright blue, and then some are like white, and then, like that. And then there's different birds also, and then they also sing and do their chirping. And you don't really see that so much with like sheep, for instance. I've never seen a sheep that is like bright red and blue and has like gold streaks down it or something. Or you don't really see that so much with, some other, like cows, for instance. A cow with bright blue spots and green, on the side. There's some animals that look pretty cool, like a Siberian tiger. There's that picture with you and Abhimanyu in it with that tiger, the Bengal tiger. It's white and looks pretty cool. But for the most part, it seems like birds, they have the most variety of different colors and things. And then also in India, they have these bright green parrots that, fly around and things I've seen. So there's birds. So the yogi can see that, meditate on that. And this specific word used here is vichitram. So my understanding in Sanskrit, V is like an intensifier. It it emphasizes something. And so chitra, I believe, is the root of the word. And chitra means like variegative or like artistic or thing like that. So very artistic. Continuing, it's mentioned here as Manu as a symbol of intellect. So emblem in the sense is just, it's like I mean, there's like an actual emblem, which is like some sign or something, but it's like something that really identifies something. So Manu, Prabhupada mentions in the purport about Manu Samhita. So there's different laws which are given in order to rule human society. And Prabhupada would explain those different things in text, but I don't know all the rules of Manu Samhita, but it explains about how this particular class should be ruled and what should be done in this circumstance and things like that. So in order to rule a society, it takes some intelligence to do that. If someone is ruling a society without a brain, then things just go into chaos. So there has to be some leader, some head who has some intellect. Nowadays, some people, they're very fond of, they don't want any government. They don't want anybody in control. They just let people do what they want to do. Let them, be free, let them express themselves. But we can see actually that when, in certain instances in society, when there was no, government or no leader in charge or somebody ruling over people took advantage of that. At least from my perception was this Hurricane Katrina when it hit New Orleans. So I remember seeing on the television, people were just, because there was no order and everything was completely destroyed, people were just going into the stores, just stealing things, just like insanely, because there was nobody to stop them. So some people argue that people are naturally, very moral and very law-abiding and this and that, but it's not in this particular age of Kali Yuga. People are not naturally moral and kind. For the most part, people are naturally immoral and not very nice. And most people are following the laws and following the rules and being nice and being kind and being polite, mostly out of fear, because they think, if I do this or do that, I want to do this, but then if I get caught, they have this crooked tendency in the heart. So that is the symptom of the age of Kali Yuga. What is this verse by, I used to know it, but I don't remember it. So Dharma, anyway, so Sukadeva Goswami explains, I think it's 12, I don't even remember the where it's at in the book. I think it's 12.2.1 or something. But, I remember part of it. But anyways, it explains how that as every day in Kali Yuga goes on, that religiosity will decline, strength will decline, ayur, lifespan will decline, intelligence, all the morality, all these different things will just go down as the progression of Kali Yuga continues. So people are not naturally law-abiding. So then there has to be some rulers. So that intelligence which it takes to rule a society and to, yeah, that's it. So the Sanskrit, you can scroll up to the Sanskrit. Yeah, okay. Tatasdanu dinam dharmaha satyam socham samadaya kalene balinan rajan nakshanyaya or balam smritihi. So so Manu is what the intelligence to rule. And then continuing, so Krishna explains, or Sukadeva Goswami explains. Oh, but just go anyways, before going to that. So Prabhupada makes a point in the purport. So he talks about the Manu Samhita. Then he mentions about human society as his residence, where he stays. And that the whole idea of the human being is meant for God realization and association with God. So that's a very important point, actually, because if there's a human society but is devoid of God consciousness and is devoid of religious principles, and there's no talk of God, there's no mention of God, though we may write it on the bills that we use as currency, it's not a human civilization, actually. So there's very many verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Shastras which explain the importance of human form of life, and that is met for self-realization. There's one in the 11th canto, but also in the 5th canto, Rishabhadev mentions that Nayam Loka, that's slipping my verse, Nayam Loka, Nayam Deha Deha Bhajam Niloke, Kashtan Kaman Arhate Vidbhajame, Tatov Divyam Puchakayena Satvam Shudyas Yasmad Brahmashokyam Twamanantam. So specifically this last line mentions that the life shouldn't, the beginning explains that you shouldn't engage life simply like an animal, just eating, sleeping, mating, defending, looking for sense gratification. But actually you should use the human form of life specifically for the cultivation of Krishna consciousness. So this is, so if the society is geared in such a way, then that is the proper way, that's proper harmony will be experienced, which Prabhupada begins to hint at the end of the purport. So, continuing, specifically this also, the point is given here of the celestial species. So, Gandharvas, Vijayharas, Charnas, and angels is the translation given, but also Apsaras, that's the understanding. So, so it's automatically understood just by reading this that those who are getting this understanding, they weren't under the conception, first of all, that life just came out of chance and just a bunch of chemicals, and the mankind is at the height of his of advancement in civilization currently, and that we've come out of so many thousands of years of being monkeys and things like that. But people, it's implied in the text that they understood that there was different planets and different living beings, higher and lower, and like that. Specifically, the Gandharvas and Vijayharas are mentioned as they can sing wonderfully and it can entice the minds of heavenly demigods. So understanding to that also, anyways, it's interesting to think about, but that the Gandharvas and Vijayharas, it's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam and Vedic literatures that they're very expert in music and singing and things like that. And so that specifically and the heavenly planets, that these demigods would be engaged in singing and performing and things like that, and apsaras and dancing. So we can imagine, we can just see even in this planet that some people sing, but not everybody's a good singer. Some people sing better than other people, some people not so good. And then generally someone that is a very good singer, they can become very famous, and then they might become some opera singer or whatever, some Broadway singer like this or whatever, maybe make some movie or something, and be a very good singer. So not everybody is a good singer, but these specific Gandharvas and Vijayharas are very excellent singers. So much so that they can entice the mind of the demigods. Demigods, some higher beings, a little bit more cultured and things like that. So their singing must be very nice. I've never heard a Gandharva sing, but sometimes if someone's a very good singer in the devotional society, Krishna consciousness will say, oh, they sing like a Gandharva or something like that. They're very nice singers. They sing like a demigod. So those things are there. And that singing also, we can make some inference into that. But it's probably not something like how we're so aware of on this planet. Like the demigods that they're listening to rap and rock and roll music, probably not so much. But it's a little bit more sophisticated than that. I know previously, maybe not so much. Anyways, I don't know so many things, but specifically with more classical artists and things like that, their whatever symphonies and their things like that, they would be based on religious concepts. They would write these songs glorifying God, and then they would write them in a particular way also. They would have to be like certain notes they would use and certain scales and then certain chords and things like that. And then that was, that music was to glorify God. And so that was there. So anyways, like that. So the demigods, the music and sense of music is much more sophisticated than what we may think and understand now. There's also, just to read here, I don't know where I put my phone. So I'll pull up a text from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Anyways, you don't have to pull this up, but it's in Canto 6, Chapter 2, Text 22. And so this verse in particular, oh, that's not the right verse. Oh, sorry, Canto 5, 22. 6, 5, 22. So this particular verse just talks about the kind of like music a little bit in relation to Narada Muni. So I'll just read the translation. So the 7 musical notes, sa, ri, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni, are used in musical instruments, but originally they come from the Samaveda. The great sage Narada vibrates sounds describing the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. By such transcendental vibrations, such as Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, he fixes his mind at the lotus feet of the Lord. Thus he directly perceives Hrishikesha, the master of the senses. After delivering the Haryashvas, Narada Muni continued traveling throughout the planetary systems, his mind always fixed at the lotus feet of the Lord. So I'll just read that, just that there. So that in particular describes about how the musical notes, which is the basic notes of any of a simple musical scale, is that originally comes from the Samaveda, which is given by Krishna, and learn like that. So the actual musical art, everything of knowledge is actually described in the Vedas. We just don't have it, or it's lost. And without getting so much into the whole Samaveda, so we can understand and appreciate like that the ability to glorify. So like the actual musical art in itself comes from Krishna, and then the perfection of that ability is in glorifying Krishna, singing properly. So nowadays, all the people have all these different musical sciences, and what do they use the music for? I mean, it's so much nonsense. They sing in music. It's actually pretty disturbing, and they sing about this thing, that thing, the other thing, but they never actually glorify the one who is the master of all music. They glorify themselves, so they become a great, musician, and then they take all credit that I worked so hard and did all this. So that ability comes from Krishna, and so that art's perfection is in completeness when it's used to glorify Krishna. So, anyways, Narada Muni, he knows the science, and so he sings very nicely about Krishna, and it's wonderful. And also too with the Vedic sciences. Music too. It's in the whole Vedic culture is very sophisticated, and how you speak, how you act, how you talk, how you sit, all these different things, all these little details are there. They mean something. And so, even too with singing, Srila Prabhupada specifically asked that in the morning that the morning tune is sung, and then in the evening he had the evening tune that is sung. So those who are expert in the science of music, they know specifically what ragas or what scales to sing at what particular time of the day and what mood and all those different things. That is a whole artistic science, and so that's used to glorify Krishna. And then there's dancing also. What's that's described in the Bhagavatam. The Apsaras, they know how to dance. And so, anyways, usually their dancing is, it's more enticing than in glorifying Krishna. There's, the description's given many times in the Bhagavatam about that. So and it's here given as angels. But Apsaras, they would dance very nicely, and then they would, generally they would attract the mind of some yogi who is trying to focus his mind on, whatever, giving some power or something like that to be to distract him. So this verse in particular is talking a little bit about that. And then also too, I had some quote from Prabhupada, so let me pull that up. So the Samaveda is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. But before getting to that, there's just some small quote. So Prabhupada explains, so the whole Samaveda is music. Gayanti Yana Samagno. Samaveda is full of music, the musical sounds. So Prabhupada is just explaining that there. And then in the Bhagavad Gita, the Krishna explains, go here. So anyway, you don't have to pull it up, I'll just read it. So Krishna explains in the 10th chapter, the 22nd verse, he says, Vedanam Samavedosmi. So of the Vedas, I am the Samaveda. And then further on in the text, I'll see if I can find it and write it down. But Krishna mentions that, and then within the Samaveda, there's a particular like poem or mantra which he is. Do you know that off the top of your head?
I think it's different
I think it's Brihat Sama or something. I think I got, anyways, I got it. Yeah. So Brihat Sama Tata Sam Nam. Yeah, I'm there. So then, anyways, I tried to find this, but I couldn't find it. But, so particularly so I'll just read the first purport because it talks about that. So it's already been explained by the Lord that amongst all the Vedas, he is the Samaveda. The Samaveda is rich with beautiful songs played by various demigods. One of these songs is the Brihat Sama, which has an exquisite melody and is sung at midnight. So, anyways, Krishna is mentioning that all those hymns at that particular one. So that must be a nice song, a nice hymn. But anyways, I couldn't find it. Maybe it'll come up one day. So, and then also too mentioned in the, anyways, I won't pull it up, but the reference is the 3rd canto, chapter 21, text 34. So in that particular text, Prabhupada, the translation is mentioned about how when, I believe this is when, this must have been when Vishnu was coming to see Kardama Muni. So he came riding on the back of Garuda, and so the flapping of Garuda's wings is mentioned that the Samaveda emanates from that. And the Prabhupada makes a point in the purport that the devotees can actually hear that, the glorification of Krishna through Garuda's wings. So, anyways, all these different things are there. Little nice details in Krishna consciousness. And so Prabhupada makes a point also continuing in the purport. He talks about the prowess of the demons. And then he makes an interesting point actually. He says that Maharaj Prahlad is the right type of representative of the Lord in the family of Asuras. And I mean, there might be different things to understand that, but I was thinking, particularly in this translation, it's mentioned that the demons are known for their virya, for their prowess, like, bravery in battle or whatever. So I was thinking particularly that that maybe that's being mentioned with Prahlad Maharaj, because Hiranyakashipu was practically the most powerfulest and the strongest demon on the planet during that time when there was that altercation between him and Prahlad. And Prahlad Maharaj actually didn't back down from him, that he stood up and like that. He didn't, like all the other demigods, they acknowledged his supremacy and, did whatever he wanted. But Prahlad Maharaj, he wasn't afraid, and the main reason he wasn't afraid because he had took complete shelter of the Lord and was confident in his protection or whatever may happen. So in that sense, he's of all the asuras, he has the most prowess, the most virya. So I was thinking maybe that was being mentioned particularly in that sense with Prahlad Maharaj. And Prabhupada goes on to explain here in the purport, which kind of ties it together. He mentions a couple things here, so I'll read this here. So let's see. So all these things, what Prabhupada brings up a very important point. I mean, we're talking here about the artistic sense, how the yogis can see that, and intelligence, and then the musical sense. The conclusion is then how can the Supreme Lord be impersonal? So if we see all these things in the world and the creation, who's the individual that created this? You see such a great and amazing work of art, you don't think, it just came out by chance, but you think, wow, this is an amazing piece of art. Who's the person that actually created that? So this intellect and all these artistic things which are being described by Sukadeva Goswami, the perfection of that is actually found in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we can just imagine and think that how great Krishna's artistic sense actually is, how great his intelligence is, how great his musical sense is and his rhythm. Like that, what is found in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so it's not some mundane, musical talent, but it's completely pure and completely free from all material tinges. So the yogi who's following this process, when his mind is cleansed, he'll begin to come to realize and understand that. And so Srila Prabhupada makes the point about harmony. So everybody has their specific duty in human society. You know, some people, you know, whatever. Some people sweep the street. Some people make the laws. Some people, you know, whatever, police officer. Some people are, you know, whatever. You have mothers, fathers. Everybody has their own duty in society. So that's, and everybody should follow their duty, that's nice. But the actual perfection of all duty is when it's done in relation to the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada's making that point there, that it all has to be centered and focused around Krishna consciousness. And then there'll be actual, real harmony. And that point is mentioned time and time again. That otherwise, and then there'll always be so many levels of contention that, you know, if we put the environment as the sole focus of you know, of creating a perfect society, then you have people that aren't into that. There's people that want to cut down the trees and they want to, you know, urbanize, you know, whatever. There's so much, there's contention going on, but, you know, like what about rainforest and things like that? I used to hear growing up. So they don't, some people want to cut down the rainforest, some people, they want to, you know, some people want to cut it down, some people don't want to cut it down. So and then, you know, then you can go on with that. And then it's, some people want, you know, more factories and things, some people don't. But the thing is that until one comes to the platform of Krishna consciousness, there will always be contention on these different things because it's on the mental platform. But when one is firmly situated in the verdict of Shastra, then one can see things as they actually are. And then one understands that to create all these different factories and things like that, one sees it in the Krishna conscious way, that, you know, one is creating these different factories, and they may be producing money and things like that, but they're actually, we can see that they are reducing the morale of individuals and causing them to live an artificial life and all these different things. So anyways, that can be much analyzed. I'm not really going to get into all that. But the point is that one has to come to a Krishna conscious center. And this purport is ended by explaining about how when Lord Chaitanya went through Jharkhand forest, and that's mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Maybe I'll read a little bit of that if there's time at the end. But it's described that Lord Chaitanya was going through and he was chanting Hare Krishna, and all the different animals and things like that they were chanting along with him and dancing along with them. And anyways, it was amazing feat. And so Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by his chanting, he can awaken the Krishna consciousness of all living beings. So anyways, that's given as a description in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And we can understand from that shows many things we can understand, but that shows the natural dormant state of all living entities. Particularly we see in this, I've seen what we see generally, that animals, you know, they're very scared and very fearful, and you know, if you try to approach them, they run away. But there's different ways of that fear is there, but if in that instance when Lord Chaitanya was chanting, that fear wasn't actually there in the animals. And then we could see also too that if an animal has faith and trust in the society or the individual, then, you know, they won't run away and won't be fearful. Anyway, some small thing. But I remember in one school that the squirrels there, that they wouldn't run away and they would come up to you and you could like pet them and things like that, because they weren't, you know, whatever. They weren't fearful of the people. They understood that, you know, whatever, in their squirrel brain, that the human beings won't hurt them. So anyways, there's a couple different angles of understanding this particular verse, and I'll stop there if there's any questions or comments about anything.
Your last comment of these squirrels or whatever.
Yeah.
When we went to the Denver temple, they give all the squirrels there prashadam, and like they will, like, if you sit down, they will like get on your lap, like, ready for like some prashadam.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a video of it. Like, you saw it. They got pretty close. Like,
I didn't see it. They're kind of in the Lachua too. In the Lachua temple, you'll see them like hanging right outside the kitchen. Because they get right up to your feet. I had me last time on them. So
yeah.
Pretty freaky.
So yeah.
He never
shop them scraps. I don't know, they give them a lot, yeah. And the Sunday feast they have outside, when we were there, they were looking up like little milk spots and like rice grains and
It's really
whatnot.
weird.
Yeah.
It's funny.
In regards to Prabhupada comparing Prahlad Maharaj to having Darasura, having the
Yeah.
great Prabhupada. Seeing another pastime of Prahlad Maharaj, I mean, we don't, usually in the Bhagavatam, there's no description of him fighting a war,
Hmm.
right? There's a description of Dhruv Maharaj, like annihilating all
Yeah.
the yakshas on the planet, right? There's this other instance of Prahlad Maharaj, and another way of, showing his prowess was that, once Prahlad Maharaj was going around the forest and he was touring there, he came across this person who had long hair, was dressed like an renunciate, but also had a bow. So he thought this as a rasabas, like what is this? How can we renunciate and also be like a warrior? So he decided, he challenged this person to a war, and they were constantly fighting. And the fight went on for many, many days between both of them. And neither were able to defeat the other. And then, but Prahlad Maharaj made a vow that I will defeat you. Then, while the war was going on, the fight was going on, and they got tired. And the next day, when Prahlad Maharaj was doing his puja to Shalagram, he had put a garland on this deity. And then the same garland appeared on this person. Then he realized actually he was fighting Narayana Rishi.
Hmm.
He said, "Oh my Lord, I can't fighting with you, but like I can't go on fighting with you because it's you. But I made a vow that I will defeat you." Then Narayana Rishi says, Narayana Rishi says, "Prahlad, I'm always defeated by you." And I'm always defeated. So that's like the prowess of Prahlad.
Yeah.
And that he was able to not just fight an arm for the Supreme Lord, but also
Yeah.
make the Lord admit defeat.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm about to, listen, I'm just going on before.
The 4 minutes.
And I have another thing. I remember reading the Prabhupada's Yashapuja book. Like there were
Yeah.
different disciples, and there was one disciple of Srila Prabhupada who got initiated in New York. And he was comparing Srila Prabhupada's coming to Tompkins Square Park, and he was making all the doing the Harinam and making all of them dance to like Lord Chaitanya going to the Charita and the
Okay, nice. Yeah.
and making all the animals dance. He actually, out of his humility, he compared himself to one of those animals,
Hmm.
in Jharkhand forest. And Prabhupada compares himself to like one of those animals, and like that. Srila Prabhupada was able to make them dance and embrace each other and come together. And from a medical point of view, like the hippies are practically speaking the most useless members of society. But just like Lord Chaitanya was able to infuse those animals with the Shakti, with the potency to experience love of God, Srila Prabhupada was able to not just make them experience the ecstasy of love of God, but organize them in such a way that they became the most powerful spiritual movement that the world has ever seen.
Hmm.
So I was just thinking about that other point that was mentioned.
Yes.
It was just a comment about like the different ragas and whatnot. And I was thinking how it's so nice to be around devotees who are aware of these arts. And my spiritual master was sharing this story of, he likes to sing the tune Jeev Jago
Hmm.
by Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
Yeah.
And but he sings it in a very like cheerful melody. And one of his godbrothers actually corrected him. This devotee is a famous musician. His name's Kalki Prabhu.
Hmm.
He's done a lot of preaching in South America. And he was saying, actually, no, you have it wrong. This is actually a very sad song because it's like the lamentation of like the jiva, how they're sleeping, and Maya,
Hmm.
and like the witch, and all these different things. So he taught him a new melody for the Bhajan Vidhi Sangam. And he said he was able to appreciate like the sentiment of Bhaktivinoda Thakur a bit more rather than just, maybe singing it whatever way you want.
Hmm.
But I was just kind of appreciating that in the class
Yeah, there's the singing, and then there's emotion that goes behind it. So that's important also when we're singing different bhajans and things like that. Even chanting verses. Anyways.
Yeah, it's nice how these bhajans, they're sung in such a way that it's pleasing to the Lord. Therefore, like, it resonates with the soul. You know, whereas you just listen to any mundane song, it just puts you on the mental platform. Which is really nice. There's a whole depth to, all these different bhajans compared to just any normal mundane song. Really nice. It's really different. Once you like listen to these bhajans, these regular songs are just like useless.
Yes.
Like the point of like ragas, and that like kirtan like both with like pamphlet or like grimoires,
Hmm.
and he like writes a little bit on that. Like he mentions it briefly, but I remember one point from there. He said he mentioning like singing like specific times of the day. He says the same thing like Srila Prabhupada wanted like
Yeah.
for the morning tune. He wanted like just the basic like the two like up and down. There's other like morning tunes for those would be something like
Yeah.
other points in the morning. And he says in relation to like singing appropriate tunes at appropriate parts of the day is like when you like break a raga or like you try to sing something at your own point in the day, you write something like it causes cosmic disharmony and disorder.
Oh my God.
In the same part, Prabhupada actually gives an example of, I think it was Akbar, or like one of the Muslim emperors, they had actually called him a very like famous like singer of the ragas. He was he knew how to sing them very perfectly well. And it was like in the middle of the day. And he was insisting that he sings a raga which is only to be sung in the middle of the night.
Hmm.
And he insisted that he do it, and then he finally ordered him to do it. After much reluctance, this person started singing it. He started singing it, the entire room and everything just became dark.
Hmm.
You know, in the same. That's where that comes from. Yeah.
Also, one question.
Yeah.
So like with the ragas is like from the Vedic system, and like obviously, I mean it's like strictly Vedic, practically speaking, and it's like it's one of the 64 arts. But you see that like our acharyas, like specifically, they not so much didn't emphasize on it, but like yeah, I mean if you see like the kirtans of Srila Prabhupada, it's really simple. And he was in the West, but even Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he himself didn't lead kirtan to my knowledge. And like he didn't encourage his disciples to like, overall, our acharyas kind of like drift away or like don't so much encourage like, how to say, I guess there's musical talent,
Yeah.
like, you know, exploring like knowledge of that. Cause you just like explore, even though originally it's the, how to say, the property of Krishna.
Yeah.
So could you just like speak on a little bit about that?
Okay. One.
The science is there. I mean, we use it in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when devotees try to get into like, you know, like actually like learning the raga, generally it's like sort of bad or like discouraged.
Yeah, I think like one of the main things with that is that that one shouldn't be like that one should see. The thing is that if you, I mean, it depends on the individual first of all. So the main thing, of course, is Krishna consciousness. Okay, like, you know, hearing about Krishna, chanting about Krishna, that's like the focus. So I was reading this morning about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So he studied Jyotish for many years, and he was expert in that. But he always kept his devotional, whatever, he was a Nityasiddha, but he always gave emphasis to devotional service. And he also, too, he gave greater importance to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's, like his opinions on things or whatever you could say than his Jyotish calculations. So that's like a very important point. So the thing is that, you know, some devotees have like learned that science, but you know, Srila Prabhupada didn't want like people becoming overly musical, because it's not, you don't have to know all, like, you know, I mean, we learn some basic things just by being in the devotional society, like, you know, sing this melody in the morning, don't sing it in the evening, sing this one in the evening, don't sing it in the morning. So you learn some basic things. That's enough to please Krishna and go back home, back to Godhead. So some devotees may learn that science, and then there may be some room for that. But the main thing is that they should be devotees, and they should have that surrender, and they should have that firm understanding. Because what the tendency, what sometimes of that is, it could just turn into a big show. That someone they know kirtan so much, and then everybody wants that person to sing kirtan because it's musically very pleasing. And so that's kind of like the danger with that sometimes, is that it can turn more into a sense gratification thing about I like this person singing because, it's nice to my ears. The Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, there was that instance when I believe he was leaving his body, he had somebody sing that wasn't a very good singer. So the main thing is, one's devotion. But in certain circumstances, one may be very devotional, and they may sing off key and sing off tempo and so many things. And so, you may not want that individual to sing like at Rath Yatra, where there's 20,000 people, because no one will be able to follow it. But the main things which the acharyas always teach is that individual surrender and devotion. So there could be room for individuals to learn that science, but there's so many different things. There's not just singing. There's so many different branches of Vedic knowledge, which that's a part of Vedic culture, and then people, they learn that. There's dancing also. There's so many different things, but the core of it is that individual is surrendered to Krishna and surrendered to Guru and like that. And then that's just another way of glorifying Krishna. And then they glorify Krishna in an elaborate, extravagant way. And that's great and that's amazing. And then someone else is a potter, and what are they doing? They're creating amazing, wonderful pots, for Jagannath Mahaprasadam. So everybody, has their, and then that individual too that goes into that, then they may be born in a family of that. So then that talent may be there, that karma may be there, and different things like that. So it depends on the individual mainly. We have to see, if they're learning all these different things, but then they're learning all these different musical things, but then they're not chanting their japa, and they're more and then they don't like when that devotee chants because he doesn't chant properly, it doesn't know all the ragas. So it has to be seen. So, but anyways, those different things are there, and it's mentioned. We just read that verse in the 6th canto that Narada Muni knows that science, and then he sings and glorifies Krishna. So, but Narada Muni isn't going around preaching about the musical science also. He's preaching about this body and things like that, and you have to surrender to Krishna, and that you wrote this whole Vedas and all these different things, but you forgot all about Krishna, so therefore it's a place of pilgrimage for crows. So we see that that's the focal point of the devotee's life. Maybe I don't know if you guys have some comments on that. Yes.
It's more of the recent acharyas that have discouraged it. You see? You read the book Rasikananda?
No, I like the ragas.
Okay, so you'll see that. He actually had a whole plays and dramas with very specific ragas. He was very, very specific about how the dramas played and enacted, and they enacted different pastimes of Krishna. And so that's one example of one of the acharyas. Because the Shyamanandis were not the Shyamanandis, but still we accept Shyamananda as the Siddhanta as the Gaudiya acharya. So that's one example I can remember. But in general, so you see sometimes, for instance, Srila Prabhupada encouraging something, then discouraging it. That's what happened with the harmony, specifically with the harmony. We'll discuss this later, the Ishtagoshti, but he encouraged it, then discouraged it. Because the concern is when something becomes a distraction. So the distraction happens because we are very neophyte in Krishna consciousness, and not only neophyte, we are also very neophyte in our understanding of even dharma or a sense of duty. So everything that we perceive, especially us who are coming from very sinful and sense gratificatory platforms, everything we view is with the eye of sense gratification. Whereas even materialistically speaking, those who are followers of the Vedas, even though they may learn different types of art, their profession and occupation and duty remains something else. It remains an art. Like if you see in the case of Krishna, he learned all these 64 arts, but he never employed as Kshatriyas. They still have their particular duty and occupation. They never diverted from their sense of duty. Is that kind of like understandable? So take that, expand that into the realm of Krishna consciousness. You'll see that until devotees have a capability, which is kind of, I'm just expanding on what Prabhu is saying, but until devotees develop a capability or understanding or a strong sense of duty, in our case specifically towards the service of the mission of the spiritual master and service to Krishna and devotion to Krishna, the arts and other things become simply distractions because they are ultimately employed for one's own sense gratification. So when the arts, and because Srila Prabhupada knew that several of his disciples, and the same thing, it's the same thing with regards to rules and regulations of Vedic culture, that you introduce too many rules and regulations, for those who can't handle that level of rules and regulations, it becomes a distraction from the main goal. But it doesn't mean that we have to remain on that same platform. With purity, consecutive generations are actually expected to take up more rules and regulations and still stay focused on Krishna consciousness, which is what is the eventual establishment of Varnashram Dharma, is that actually there's going to be a lot more rules that will kick in as time progresses. But, and along with those rules, also these kind of arts and culture and everything will get introduced. But the idea is to do it with those who have approached a level of purity and a sense of obligation to surrender unto the main desires of Guru and Krishna. And so in that sense, these things are discouraged. But they're also in some ways encouraged. And therefore they're mentioned. And so that's like a very brief, this is a big subject. That's a brief. That makes sense?
Yeah. I think thinking that even in Salem, the group who I was looking at the video, they're learning Veena. They're learning the Veena and all these things. So it's certainly like an aspect of Varnashram that's presented. But usually what we see in our case is that we're like 27 years old, we just joined the Brahmachari ashram, we used to be a rock star before we joined, and now we want to get into the music aspect of it. You see where that Maya comes in? We just want to just dive right in without getting the focus on. But like Prabhu was saying, especially Srinivas Acharya, he has a Manohar Shai style of kirtan. And I think Mukunda Datta Prabhu learned that style, or something like this. It's a very, very beautiful style and needs to be kept alive. But I think Guru Maharaj and the devotees involved in these kinds of Varnashram projects are teaching the younger generations right from before they have all these like other contaminations, raising them up in purity like this, and then bringing them to that standard of being employed. Of course, the most beautiful thing needs to be offered to Krishna. Like there's a pastime of
They're teaching them that? Teaching them that style kirtan?
I'm not sure about the
I don't know if they're teaching that style,
but the traditional style
That's amazing.
is really amazing, and it's part of the culture. Even like in
What was that quote Shamsundar Prabhu mentioned about the Shanai to us? We
the
never knew this story.
Shanai.
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada said Shanai, the sound of Shanai is the sound of the gopis yearning for Krishna. So we want to.
You know what the Shanai is?
I think
I don't even
I remember interested in Vidagi, he had probably had like Chennai band or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shanai is a
You were playing it. You were playing it that one day. Remember? And I was like, "Why are you playing the Shanai?"
It's like a one string.
Huh?
Is it one string?
That's ekta.
I was playing it, but
No, that's an ekta.
That's an ekta.
I
I have
know.
to hear it again.
I know what the sound of a Shanai is
Yeah,
like,
it's like a transcendental.
but I don't know how to play it. Yeah, I think it's as far as my knowledge goes, it's a
Wind instrument?
It's a wind instrument.
This is the one of the
Yeah.
picture of Lord Chaitanya we put on Miami.
It's the long, big thing.
Yeah, the long one. They
Yeah.
put it in the
Yeah.
big
Oh,
one.
that thing, that little
Yeah.
that it gives this yearning sound, and it's so beautiful
Yeah,
when
it's-
you hear it. It's like, oh.
Prabhupada said it's the sound of the gopis yearning for Krishna, you know. But, and that needs to be engaged and applied, like even in traditionally speaking, there's this, Ramanujacharya was in Kanchi, and Kanchi is Varadaraja is there, you know. So, one of the devotees, Yamunacharya's disciple, very, very expert at singing. So every day this devotee would come and sing in front of Varada. And every day Varada would ask him, I want to give you a benediction, I want to give you a benediction, I want to give you a benediction. But he says no. And then he goes on singing to please Varada, and he says, ask me for anything. I order you to ask me for anything except for my position and for my wife. You ask me for anything, I'll give it to you. He said, okay, I want Ramanuja to come to Srilanka. Make him come. So by that sense of singing, he pleased the Lord so much. The Lord was willing to give him anything possible. But all that singing was infused with devotion. Now, right now, like where we are, especially in our situation, we don't have enough time to like get everything together to go back home, back to gather. But when you bring it up from tradition, from the bottom, then
There's definitely risk in introducing these things.
The thing
But-
I see that like, it's not just that, it's like everything, as you see, I mean,
Yeah.
everything in the sense that, okay, just like Prabhupada's Sanskrit editor,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
learned, you could technically, it's not
Yeah, yeah.
technically an art, but you could take it as something like
Yeah.
that. And he was deviated by that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, assuming, I think Prabhupada said he never was doing it, I think. But presumably, he
it
joined the
makes
movement, he was
sense,
doing
yeah.
good in devotional service, he had the association and his spiritual master, and then like, he just got completely like,
Yeah.
and just, there's so many other things, which, I can't immediately list, but like,
Yeah, sure.
of like things which are like, of people like getting into devotional service, and they take up a service, and they try to get into it, but like, I mean, I've heard this argument before, that like, okay, so you take kirtan, there are groups of people who say, okay, this is my service, so I want to try and do it as nicely as possible, just like a cook wants to cook as nice as possible. So similarly, somebody who's learning Sanskrit, somebody who's like learning art, somebody who's they want to do those things as nice as possible, but they get deviated somehow. So where's the line between the like over-absorption into it, and then, you see what I mean?
Thanks, Prabhupada.
I can say something on that also. So the line is that, I mean, as far as we go, that we have to like make sure that we're still engaging in the process of Krishna consciousness. If someone goes into some other science or something, but then they give up the morning program, they give up chanting the rounds, they give up hearing the guru's lectures, they give up book distribution, they give up Sankirtan, and they're just focusing on this one thing, and then they're going away from further for Krishna consciousness. That's one like aspect of that. Anyway, that's my comment. I think you have something to say too.
So, the point is two things. Need. So, Srila Prabhupada had a Sanskrit editor and introduced that because there was a need to do it, and he had to introduce it. You will find that our acharyas, when there's no need, although it's an artistic ornament that would be very nice to offer to Krishna, because there's no need at the point of time, they don't introduce it.
That's a good point.
That's one very important point to understand why sometimes our acharyas introduce certain things that didn't cause devotees to get diverted, but on other cases they restricted it. So that's one thing. Second thing, but especially when you're dealing with children and they're growing up, they have a lot of time in their hand, they have to learn different things, and it's not like us, right? We're actually going through a crash course in Krishna consciousness.
Yes,
That's what we're doing. This is the crash course in Krishna consciousness. Is like,
say less.
it's like, we're already this old and, full of lusty desires and this and that, and now we really need like a super intense program, otherwise, we're finished. But, kids are younger and they have time and, it's not that.
And the ability to
time.
learn too.
They have ability to learn, they have age, and, they're under, first of all, because of their age, they're not given independence. That's not the case with us. We have all the independence. You walk outside to go and, do nonsense on the street corner. What can you do? You do it right in front of the temple on the street corner. Nobody can stop you, But a child, is more. So that's one thing. Second thing is, even when there is a need, The devotees should understand that their artistic abilities have to be offered in line with tradition as the artistic abilities have been offered in the past. That's another huge aspect where people lose it completely. If they come up with their own ideas and speculations, the problem is because of our background is a background of sense gratification. Their speculation is based on that sense gratification.
Absolutely.
And then that mixes in along with their offering to Krishna and then brings about other weeds that destroy the creeper of devotional service. They don't do it in line with tradition. Okay, if you want to learn how to play a particular instrument, you play it. But then what they do is they take that and they fusion it with something else, and they mix it with this, and they create their own kind of like speculation, then it turns everything into, that's another thing. If you have a desire to offer, then you offer in the footsteps of the predecessor acharyas because that was pleasing to Krishna. Okay, you're learning, wonderful. Well, you learn the same way the predecessor acharyas learned. The thing is, generally, if you want to learn it the way people in the past did it, it's a long and hard process. Even with a simple instrument. And to find that, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy. Nobody has the time, nobody has the energy, nobody has the money. But then they have the desire, but then it's better to step back and wait until those things can actually manifest in the Krishna conscious community. Generally, they don't take all these considerations into these considerations are not brought into light.
We just one, like Shamsundar Prabhu was giving an example. Never get it. Like Shamsundar Prabhu was also making this point that how so many devotees, like in the name of astrology, have basically dug their own grave. Even Guru Maharaj. And like he was giving examples of people we know. Huh?
Ayurveda is the same thing.
Yeah, Ayurveda is the same thing.
Completely.
Wow, way off. And even up here, up there, when Guru Maharaj was giving a lecture, he was speaking about devotees and academics. And
Academic preaching.
Academic preaching, and they come to Mayapur to study, and then one devotee just got absorbed in studying, and he was just studying Panini, and he's like, Bhakti, I don't even want to study Bhakti, but I was just in Bengali, who cares about this Bengali, immediately Sanskrit, and you just completely lose the point. Like why you started it, because you're embellishing the point of the need, because you need to do it otherwise. Better go by someone else.
Yes. Before the Mataji's had any questions, I had one comment on something you said earlier, just some addition. But even Lord Chaitanya, when Chota Haridas committed suicide, he would listen to his singing at whatever on the seaside that's mentioned there. That he would come and hear his singing. Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways. So, any questions or comments from the Matajis? Yes. So your question is, there room for women publicly dancing in Vaishnava society? Okay. Well, I mean, you mentioned that quote right there that Srila Prabhupada, that he asked that not to be done. And there's also an instance where I think there's another instance of the same thing that Prabhupada also asked that not to be done, of the women dancing on stage. As far as what Guru Maharaj is saying, I mean, there's different things. I think his thing is, what he's explaining is that he doesn't kind of like enforce that, and that's like in kirtan in the temple. So if like and it's kind of like, I mean, that's like an I don't know, I mean, that's like a big subject, but that the kind of the individual has to kind of see like what they're comfortable with. But in India and Vedic society, that's not so much done. Women, they would dance and things like that, but it was like in a private setting. And I think you have, I forget the term exactly, but they would have like, say, what?
David does.
Devi Dasi, that was it? Like the dancers for Jagannath?
Yeah.
Antapura,
Also,
the
David
inner
does.
quarters.
Okay. But they would learn how to dance and things, but they would do it in, you know, in front of the deity and no one else would be there. And then that's also mentioned with Ramananda Roy, that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that he had these women that he was training up as to dance for Lord Jagannath. And there's that, so they would some would know that art, but then they wouldn't dance publicly like that. But I mean, there must be some class that do dance publicly, because you have like the Apsaras and they're dancing in Indra's court. But that wasn't, if a girl was dancing publicly, it was generally understood that there wasn't a very high class thing to do. So, like that.
So, I've acted in dramas, and so we had a whole thing about this back in India. Something that, also lacking here in Krishna life. But yeah, there's specific instructions where Srila Prabhupada actually, although disciples did play, and women did play in the plays, Srila Prabhupada actually asked them to not. So how do you dress women like roles? The men dress like women in play. We've done that in India. I've been part of plays like this. Why is it done like that? Because that's how it's traditionally done too. Traditionally, dramas are also played in that same way. Women who generally dance in public belong to a lower caste. The higher caste would never allow it, although the higher caste women would learn dance. But it was done privately. To the other women and the elders of the family, something like this. I know our devotees in underground have done extensive research in this regard. Apsaras, they're basically celestial prostitutes. That's what they are. It's directly called celestial prostitutes.
He's calling them angels here.
And yeah, they are. They are angels.
I didn't really want to comment on that, because that's Prabhupada said that.
No, I mean angels because, if you want
Angelic,
if you want to
heavenly.
take the Abrahamic conception of celestial beings, it's
Yeah, they're
angels.
literally.
Yeah.
So that's, sometimes Prabhupada or Bhaktisiddhanta sometimes would use words. like
Yeah.
this, but not the American angel. So yeah, that's the thing about dramas.
Well, one of the Shakespearean plays, didn't even the Shakespearean plays, there were men who played the parts of women also?
I don't know.
Well, there was, I mean,
Remember them, yeah, I think so.
in different European societies, they had a whole caste of men which they would castrate the boys, and then they would, because when you hit a certain age, I forget the exact term, but your voice drops. So then, but then you have this falsetto, and then you could sing all the women part and sing so high. So they would call them castratis, I think. I think that was in Italy.
Eunuchs are basically.
Yeah.
When Vedic culture was extant, there was so much protection in place. There were a whole group of women who would learn to dance just for the Lord. Now, they would dance just for the Lord doesn't mean that everybody else in the temple gets kicked out. No, actually, when the performance happens with the Lord, the other people will also be watching. But they wouldn't be facing the audience, they would be facing the Lord. And in this regard, when the Muslims invaded Sri Rangam, and those are the ones called Devi Dasis, and they're actually, some of them are so chaste that they would not get married because they considered themselves as consorts of the Supreme Lord. It was that, it's difficult to understand or even imagine this level of devotion. So one such woman, in order to save the Ranganath temple from destruction, save the Lord, save the deity, give enough time to the deity. What she did was, now they were very expert. So she actually went to the camp of the Muslim invader, and she danced him, she mesmerized him, she drunk with him, which is something that she cannot even imagine she would ever drink. And then when in his drunken state, she fed him poison. Or some stories say that she pushed him off.
No, she mixed poison in the alcohol and both of them drank.
So she mixes alcohol. There's different versions of the story.
Yeah, one is like pushing.
So one version is both of them get drunk, and she entices him onto the top of the gopura of the temple, and then pushes him off of the temple and pushes him to death. Another version is that she mixes poison, and she, in order to convince him to drink it, she would drink it also. And then, she would come and report that and die in front of the deity. In this way that I've sacrificed my life trying to save you. Very, very emotional story. It was actually, you read the whole thing, it's difficult to not cry. It's very, very touching, very moving. A kind of devotion that devotees in the past have exhibited like this. Women apparently doing not very prestigious, actually very prestigious, but sometimes from a materialistic perspective they may think she's just some dancer. But she had such a level of devotion that she went back home like the garden. Okay, Hare Krishna, good night.
Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna.
Made it.